So, this was an image that Michelle Manos, my staff person and good friend, at the back table, say, hi, Michelle, there you are. She said, you like Sandra Bullock, don't you? Well, here's an image. This is Sandra Bullock in a movie called 2 Weeks' Notice. And she's standing in front of the Wreckers Ball because she doesn't want to see a community center demolished on Coney Island. In 1979, I stood in front of a Wreckers Ball in Stockton because a very prominent local individual, whose name I won't mention because I don't want to get in trouble, but he had given his house to a bank for a parking lot. And they were going to tear this house down. I love this house. So I was standing there with a bunch of nuns from the Catholic school where I was teaching, and we were, don't tear this house down, right? They said, okay, we won't do it. So we all went home thinking, boy, what a great success that was. And the next morning, at Sunday, 10 a.m., they tore the house down. The irony of being in historic development is that, and sometimes the biggest problem you have are historic preservationists because they want to see that cigar store that they remembered in 1920 stay a cigar store. And it may end up being an Ethiopian restaurant. They want to see that car dealership stay a car dealership, and maybe it's going to be an office building. And those kinds of problems faced by historic developers, by people who want to save historic buildings, is truly an irony. And we have to learn to work together and understand that in the modern world, people who move into downtowns are going to want the same amenities that they get everywhere else. And we can do that with the exception of things like parking. And that's why it's good to build an infill downtown so that when your business moves downtown, you park your car and it's done. You go to one of our buildings and you take a workout. Then you go see your doctor. And then you go to have a cup of coffee. And you never have to leave and drive away. And what I'm going to talk about later on, and this is good for employers because they don't lose any time from their employees leaving the office workplace. We don't want to lose an opportunity in our downtowns, but massive suburban housing developments may have again temporarily provided jobs and industry. But after the developments were built, again, the jobs were gone. And cities were left to address the inability to pay for fire, police, road maintenance, and other infrastructure and essential services. I tell people that building houses is not an industry that will endure in your communities forever. When Kaufman Broad is done building their houses, they're going to leave. So if you don't have people who have jobs willing to live in these houses, then they will be on the foreclosure list. And that's why we're seeing so many houses go into foreclosure, because they didn't anticipate after they built these houses that they wouldn't be occupied and there wouldn't be jobs sufficient to allow people to buy these houses. So, in the ideal world, the places we love should be within walking distance. Wouldn't you like to live in a city that reminds you of a place you want to vacation? Imagine living amongst the coffee houses and the galleries and restaurants in cities like Paris and Istanbul, New York, or San Francisco. We all love the pedestrianization of Santa Monica. I love that place. We love Soho and the Shattuck neighborhoods in Berkeley. But it's not where most of us live. Where we live is spread out all over California suburbs. The reason San Francisco survived is because it's 7.9 miles from the beach to the breakers. From the bay, to the breakers. And that's it. You better use what you've got and use it well. But some of our cities, Bakersfield, Fresno, Stockton, 30, 40 miles from one end to the other. Houses all along the way. No neighborhoods. You have to drive everywhere you want to go. That is not only unsustainable, but it's inhuman. And we're the only nation that lives like this. Other countries have to save their historic downtowns because that's all they have. And they have no more land to build on. And that's how we have to look at our downtowns. In fact, and again, Michelle brought this up to me the other day, she talked about promenades. Promenades, right? You know those places where there's shops on either side, you walk, and there are so many fall promenades in shopping centers all over this country. Now you can't take a cruise ship without a promenade. A promenade! All historic neighborhoods had promenades. They were called sidewalks. And on the sidewalks we had tables where people sat and businesses whose awnings reached over there. And there was a sense of place. You could touch each other. You could know what was going on. This is what we have to come back to. We have to live in vital and viable neighborhoods. We need to come back to our cities. And in order to come back to our cities, they have to be useful. And they have to be habitable. So, what I'm asking you guys today is to help me and to go back to your cities and your counties and your businesses and understand that we have to collaborate. We've got some incredibly draconian codes that every historic developer has to deal with. They're unfunded mandates. When we do a large historic building like we just built for the Superior Court of California, and I'm going to talk about it a little later, at the school we just built. When I go to the city and I ask them what I'm supposed to do, they're not really sure. When I bring my engineering report, they want to debate it. We can't have that kind of obstinacy in a smooth and fluid environment in order to do our downtowns. So we need to overhaul and look at what our codes are doing to dissuade folks to come downtown and restore historic buildings. The bad news is that while we used to rely on public money for redevelopment, now we are without it or have a very limited availability. But the good news is that there's an immense availability of old historic buildings, and they're fairly cheap. For many years, it's been out of the reach of workforce to buy a building. But with mortgage rates at historic lows and with the support of some pretty creative real estate people out there and forward-thinking city and county redevelopment and building departments, the American dream of home and property ownership could be a reality. Young people are buying apartment buildings, a group of 10, and they're each owning an apartment. And instead of spending $400,000 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, they're spending $100,000, and they're rolling up their sleeves and creating sweat equity. They're doing what's called tenants in common. Who knows what a tenant in common is? We've been doing it for 100 years, and most cities can't figure out what they are, and they're not even sure what to do with them. But they're a means of owning property in an inexpensive way. And for the workforce and for affordable housing, you can't beat it. Because a young family or a retired family or someone who's just lost their job can get into their own place with a group, buy, restore, use sweat equity, and create something. Here's a project that we did about 10 years ago. This is Railroad Square. This is a real atypical project, really outside of the box of what we normally do. 10 years ago, a developer who had a ranch in Livermore had an HVAC company, and he was working on this building, putting the HVAC systems in it. It's a 120,000 square foot multi-acre mixed-use building on the wrong side of the tracks. And prior to his buying it, and even during his tenure of owning it, it was target practice. You know, the young thugs would come and blow out windows and do drug deals out in the parking lot. So he said over the years, hey Dan, you know, you do all these historic projects. Would you buy this building? And I said, what do you want to sell it for? He said, I want a lot of money for it. I said, no, I don't want it. He said, well, then I'm going to fill it up with nonprofits, and I'm going to show you I can make this thing happen. Well, he didn't make it happen. In 10 years of running into Stockton and fixing the broken windows and dealing with the drug issues and the fires, he finally came to me and said, what will you give me for it? And I said, nothing. You can give me the building. And he said, I'll take it. And he gave me the building. And I said, but your real estate broker needs to be paid 6%, and you need something for all the work that you've done in owning this property for as long as you own it. So I'm going to give you 27%, and I'm going to give your real estate broker 6%, and I'm going to give you both 33% when I find out what I'm going to do with it. So I got the keys, went to the bank, borrowed some money to put an alternative school in there, and then we slowly filled it with urban infill kinds of uses. We had a job incubator environment in there. We had the women's methadone program, which was pretty horrible. And then we evolved. And we evolved into finally putting CalWorks. And if you're not familiar with Job Club, Job Search, CalWorks, familiarize yourself with it. Don't ever let your counties take this off the table. Because welfare to work is one of the most important ways to take care of our children and to get them back in society again and out of rehab and, God forbid, out of prison. So we built this thing. We filled it up over 3 years. And this developer owner came from his ranch to have lunch with me one day. We had just refinanced the property, and he got a check for $1 million. And I was happy to refinance and give him the money. And he was delighted. He wanted to stay on the deal. And the real estate broker died, and his wife said, gee, can I stay on? It's a great deal. I said, no, go buy another historic building. And keep doing this, because now this is a vital neighborhood. It's called the Railroad Square Historic District. And houses are being renovated, and a school is being built across the street. And this East End neighborhood of Stockton, which was dead, is now alive. And these properties are available for all of you. It's not just big money developers who go out and do this. I got it for free. And if you put a collective together and you want to work downstairs and live upstairs, or what I did when I first started, I had a Victorian, and San Joaquin Development started, and he was a general contractor, and San Joaquin Design, he was an architect, and I was San Joaquin Realty, and we all meet in the boardroom of the little Victorian we had, and we collaborated. No one knew who the other one was, but you know, I figured, listen, I'll get his business, he gets my business, and we'll work together. And that's the theme of what I want to talk to you about today, is how important it is that we all work together. That's our future. And that's what made Railroad Square viable. That's the power of partnership. And by the way, we didn't use any public funds. The building facilities serve the community. Another project, this is Eden Square. 36 apartment units, in the back, senior daycare, and on the other side, child daycare. I bought this building, it was a vacant building. A couple of the young drug abusers were on the roof. One of them fell all the way down to the first floor because he had been intoxicated. He fortunately lived, but it was a very sobering experience. And my mother was walking with me in Stockton about 10 or 15 years ago when we bought this thing. We were coming back from downtown watching the fireworks, and someone threw a beer bottle off the roof and nearly landed in front of us. And she said, honey, you're not going to buy that building, are you? And I said, yes, I am, and we're going to turn it around, and we're going to make it something that this community could appreciate. So we gutted it, we fixed it all up, we built the senior daycare center, we built a state-of-the-art child daycare center, we put a cafe and an Aikido school, and the people who worked in the building lived in the building. They lived upstairs. And their employees lived in the building. So then we condominiumized it. And for $50,000, you could buy your residence. And for another sum of money, you could buy your commercial place down below. So it became this incredible urban village. One of the first we did in Stockton. And as far as I know, I haven't owned it for 10 years, it's still doing well. Park across the street, again, a transitional neighborhood, but lots of workforce, market, and some probably affordable housing. But let me tell you really why I bought it. That annex, that two-story annex to my left was a series of little offices. It looked like a gumshoe detective office. And I wanted to take a look at it before I bought it. So I tried to get the door open, and I couldn't. I kicked it, and I gave it my elbow, and finally the door opened. And when the door opened, a newspaper fell into my hand, all dusty and dirty. I opened it up,